everybody, welcome back to the Camp Chronicles podcast. Today we are going to discuss all the kind of things that people might be nervous or worried about in the lead up to getting to camp. So there's so many things that people worry might go wrong, or they worry they might not have a great experience with. So we just thought we'd kind of discuss our experience with them, just to kind of ease your minds a little bit, so you realise there's not actually that much to be worried about. So I think maybe the first place to start will probably be with choosing the right agency. I don't know about you, but I think I see a lot of people online now that are always like, should I go with this one? Should I go with this one? What are the pros? What are the cons?
When we kind of started out with camp, there was only really two main agencies we knew about, because there wasn't all of this hype on social media. But since we started out our kind of first summer, there's been so many more come out of the woodworks. And I know originally my first summer I used an agency, they were absolutely amazing, and then I switched over and used a different agency, but I had an amazing experience with both agencies.
Yeah, I know. Again, I'd never had any sort of problems with my agency that I've used. They've always been amazing, and it is definitely a good idea to go to one that's kind of reputable and maybe has a lot of participants going through them. Like you're saying, there is over the last year or two, even I feel like there's random little ones kind of popping up here and there. But yeah, definitely just kind of do a little bit of research. I think most agencies will be fine, but definitely do a little bit of research and make sure that the one that you're going with is got kind of given the right sort of price range of what you've got to pay and covers things that you want it to cover. After that, I think obviously once you've chosen your agency, the next thing would be waiting to get placed at a camp. I see so many people now, again, as well on social media, panicking because some people are starting to get placed and they maybe haven't been placed yet. But I think most kind of agencies have a very, very high placement rate. So it's, again, not something really to worry about too much, is it?
Not at all, because camps are kind of only just moving away from sorting out all of the returners and placements and where they're going. And then I think it's about the start of November, really, end of October, where camps are actually starting to hire first timers. So not they haven't necessarily looked into the hiring pool yet. I know with my agency, there's more and more camps kind of working with us now as what there was at the start of October, because their hiring has only just started for first timers. So don't panic when you're in the hiring pool and kind of maybe no camps are coming through. This is your perfect opportunity for you to do research. You reach out to camps, let them know that you're interested in them, and just kind of it gives you the opportunity to make sure that the camp is right for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even I know people that came to my camp that literally didn't get placed and didn't get a job sorted until the April. So they got placed in April 2022 and then were at camp by June. And obviously people's circumstances do change. So sometimes I know there was a girl that was meant to be a counsellor at my camp this year, and I saw her post all this stuff on TikTok, and then I get to camp and she literally wasn't there, and I was so confused. I was like, where is this girl? But people's circumstances change, and someone might be hired, and then within a few months they might not be able to come to camp anymore. So then camp have got to start rehiring to fill those places. So even up until April, possibly even May time, although that is a bit of a stretch, people they will still be looking for people to come. So again, don't stress about not getting placed. I think there's definitely going to be a camp out there for everybody.
Definitely, and I think that also ties into kind of when people are dropping out, there might be more positions open up at your camp. So like me, volleyball specialist, run and joke. I ended up general counsellor, but that could still happen. Like if you're not 100% on the position that you've got at camp, you can kind of your camp directors know that you're really interested in going to that camp, like you're so happy, but if there is room opening up to be, say, a general counsellor, or say you've chosen to be a general counsellor but you want to be a specialist, to let them know, and it kind of puts you on the list so that they know if somebody was to drop out that you would be interested in their position.
They're usually pretty flexible, aren't they? If you need to move around and they've got the space to do it, I feel like it's much easier to have you that's already hired maybe move around positions rather than having to pull somebody else new in. So it is always worth remembering that as well, definitely. Was there anything that you were like stressed out about with during like your application process or anything like that?
I think it was because I didn't have a lot of childcare experience. I was worried that, my application wouldn't be as strong as what everybody else's was. And then I know going into the hiring pool, like I didn't really hear anything for a couple of weeks, and I was so worried that just wasn't going to hear at all. But then I did end up hearing from a camp, and it kind of wasn't for me, so I turned it down. And then the same situation happened again, where it had been a few weeks and I hadn't heard from anybody.
Hmm.
So I think that's probably what stressed me out the most was getting placed at camp. So
Yeah.
then I kind of went out and researched up other camps and then ended up like applying directly, and that worked out for me in the long run.
Hmm.
But I think my biggest worry and stress was kind of the hiring pool and whether I would get placed or not. But I think now over the years it's kind of changed. You're able to like reach out interest to other camps within the hiring pool.
Hmm.
Now like kind of I mean, I've only been going to camp for what, three, going into my fourth. Over that time, kind of agencies have seen what works, what doesn't work, and it's kind of developed over the time, so it makes the hiring so much more easier.
Yeah, definitely.
What about you? What was your like worries in the application? Was it the application as itself? Was it getting like placed in camp?
And honestly, I think the bit that I was the most stressed about was that application video thing that you had to do. And like when I look back now, it's still saved on my computer. Sometimes I'll just watch it back and I'm like, God, I look so bored in it. How did I ever get placed? But like I've been doing a few like TikTok lives with like my agency, and a lot of the time like people will comment like, oh my God, I need to do an application video. Do I have to do it? What should I put on it? And like it doesn't have to be a full like movie production type thing. It literally can just be a video of you sitting there chatting about your different skills, your experience, and it's just much more enjoyable for camps directors and the people that are hiring to watch a video and like see your personality a little bit more rather than like reading it off a bit of paper. So that did stress me out a lot, but obviously in the end it was fine. But
Sparked a core memory that I totally forgot about. I totally forgot about the video that we had to do. I remember I was in my bedroom on the end of my bed, literally what I'm sat like now, and talking to the camera, and it was just so unnatural. And then
Mhm.
I got my football coach at the time to take videos of me playing football. And when I actually think about it now, I cringe out, and I'm sure that video is somewhere, and I never ever ever want to see it again. I don't think I
Yeah.
watch it back like you did. No way. I was like thinking sort of movie star, and when I looked back, it was like possibly the worst editing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I think I don't even know what I edited mine on. It might have even been like I don't know if I had a Mac at that point, so it might have even been like Windows Movie Maker type of thing or something stupid like that. And it was like I was watching other people's on YouTube because obviously you have to upload it somewhere for them to see it. But then I just obviously listed mine as private on YouTube. But some people have theirs as public, so I was like watching them like trying to suss out like what would make a good video. And some of the editing skills were insane. I was like, right, this isn't gonna end well for me, but. I still got placed with a very mediocre video, so that's something not to stress about too much.
I don't think all agencies require the video, but I know a few do, especially for
Hmm.
first timer. But I think as you move into like returning at camp, if you're going to the same camp, I don't think it's. I'm not sure if it is required or not. I don't think it is
I
for.
I haven't had to do another one or anything like that. Like once you've done one and you're hired, like you're kind of done. It's a part of your application, and don't think you've had to do another one or anything.
So then moving on from obviously the worries of kind of getting placed at camp, it's actually getting placed at the right camp. So
Mm.
I know I think this stresses a lot of people out because I think naturally as more and more people are going to camp and it's not necessarily suited for them, more kind of stories are posted online, like I've got to my camp, it's not right for me. And I do think this kind of stresses out new people going to a camp. But I think personally, you'll know the camp's right for you in your gut. Once you've done the research, once you've spoken to them, like you know all of their values, you'll know if it's right for you or if it's not. What about you? Like, how do you think kind of knowing the camp's right for you?
Well, I think what a lot of people do is they'll obviously go online and they'll look for people's experiences at those camps. And quite often for like smaller camps, like you might not find a lot of people posting their experience, but the one person that has had like a bad experience will post about it. And in my own experience, most of the time when people have had these, I'm saying experience a million times, but to best of my knowledge, when people have had these bad experiences, quote unquote bad, um, it's not necessarily always because of the camp. It's maybe just they didn't do their research, so they got to camp and it's not what they were expecting, or they just weren't a great counsellor. So if you if you go to camp and you maybe have a bad time, like the reason you're probably having a bad time is because you're not being a great counsellor and you haven't got your priorities right and you're not actually getting involved with the kids. And the camps are probably telling you that, and you're taking that as, oh, they were dismissive, they were doing this, they were doing that, they were to that. Or people get fired like from camp, like obviously let's be realistic. And again, it's the people that get fired that usually post about it. And it's like, oh well, I got fired, but yeah, what were you doing? You came back drunk off on a night off and you meant to be looking after 15 like 12-year-old kids. So it's kind of, take each like negative review with a pinch of salt when you are like looking into camps, and also, speak to returners, because returners wouldn't keep going back if if they didn't love it, would they?
No, not at all. And I think there definitely is camps out there that kind of can sell themselves a bit too much and then
Yeah,
don't always kind of follow through with what they've said that they are. So I do understand them kind of negative sides to camp,
yeah,
but kind of don't let people's experiences in that sense kind of ruin yours almost. What you've got to
yeah,
is when people are in that position, 9 times out of 10, all they have to do is call their agency, and the agency will try the hardest to find another camp for them. But when you see horror stories like I say horror stories, they're not really horror stories, but like what you've just said, kind of people who go to camp and it's not necessarily for them because they've only looked at the social side of things and they haven't realised like it is quite hard work and you are there
hmm,
a cultural exchange, not just
hmm,
a play and party and kind of that be 90% of what you do and then 10% be working with kids because that's quite
yeah.
frankly not what happens. Kind of make sure you do your research on the camps, but make sure you do your research on what the job entails and what you are going to be doing, all day, every day, and just make sure it's right for you because there's so much out there and all the positives and all the fun side of things and the little snippets that we see on TikTok. I post them, Ellen posts them, but what we are here to do is to tell you that it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Hmm.
So kind of make sure you do your research and make sure it's 100% right for you and the camp is right for you because it is a job at the end of the day, like we've said several times now.
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? Like, it is a job. Just remember in the back of your mind always, it is a job. Yes, I'm going to go and have fun and it's going to be a fun job, but it is a job. You can go see what other people's experiences are like, but just make sure you're going into it with the right expectations and not thinking it's going to be party, party, party all the time, because that's usually when people come and leave disappointed.
And then kind of, so you're placed at camp now. What are your worries and thoughts? Well, you've got to think, you've got to pack, you've got to get your flight and things like that. And I know packing was one of the things that stressed me out so much because naturally I'm going on a week's all inclusive holiday. I'm packing for 3 weeks all inclusive holiday. Then you've got to think when you go to camp, you've got to pack things for like spirit wear, your camp colours, kind of jerseys, but they're all things that you wouldn't necessarily wear if you're going to travel. And that's something my first summer I realised that I'd completely overpacked to start with. I'd packed 20 times more shorts than I needed to, and 20 more bathing suits than I needed to, and 20 times more blue and white t-shirts than I needed to. And it was stuff that I just didn't actually end up wearing because I ended up sharing with the kids and I ended up sharing with my co-counselor,
Hmm.
like with the ex-campers, for example, on spirit wear days, like our basketball tournament, our flag football tournament. I ended up wearing jerseys from past summers. So all the stuff I ended up taking, I didn't end up wearing. So I definitely think a stress is packing and overpacking. And I just think you need to kind of, I always say now, I'll pack once and then I'll
Mhm.
half. What do you,
Yeah.
is packing a stressful for you?
I love packing, right? I literally could pack, like I'll start buying things sometimes in like now realistically and think, oh yeah, I'll keep that for camp next year. I love buying things for camp and like packing because it just builds up the anticipation and it helps us like give something like for something that I'm looking forward to. But like same as you, every single year I'll always come back with stuff that I haven't worn. And like it's kind of like unavoidable realistically, like even this year going, it was my third summer. I knew what I needed and I was settled with like the type of stuff I needed, but it still took things that I didn't end up wearing or something that I literally only worn once. So advice would definitely be bring things that are like versatile, like so I just bring like t-shirts that I can wear and that on a night, and then I would also are different colors so I can also wear them for like color war and things like that if I needed to. I'm trying to think. Shoes, I'm a really big overpacker on shoes. Is my fatal flaw. I just like to have different stuff to go with all my different outfits. But again, next year I'm gonna try and like really narrow it down to just two pairs of trainers, my Crocs, my Birks, and my shower flip flops.
If there's any returners listening right now, my biggest advice is remember what you wore last summer. Try and think of the things that you didn't wear and but you took. There's a lot of like, for instance, I didn't take jeans this year. My first summer I took jeans and they were so heavy in my suitcase, and then I never wore
Mm,
them because it's so hot. So like think of what you did wear at camp and then kind of make a list of that and then reevaluate the situation when it comes closer to actually packing your suitcase.
yeah, I think we can definitely make a full episode about this realistically, maybe nearer to the packing time, because I could talk about all my packing mistakes and things like that for a long time.
Obviously, if you've never travelled before on your own, this is definitely something that is really nerve wracking. That booking them flights and knowing that you're going to get dropped off at the airport and you're left to your own devices and you've got to get yourself from A to B. I mean, if you're like, oh, you've got to get yourself from A to C, because when we fly from our airport, we've then got to fly to another airport to
Hmm.
then that airport fly to our end location. And I know some people obviously go to camps where you've got to get a couple of internal flights, but I always say, I remember the first time I went to camp was the first time I travelled on my own. And kind of when I said goodbye, we don't do emotional goodbyes in my family. When we said goodbye, it was literally, oh, I'll see you in 3 months. Went up the escalators, got to security, and I just felt like a different woman already because I was like, I've got to get through security, I've got to get to duty free, I've got to
Mm.
get to my gate, I've got to get on the plane, and you kind of like, it just naturally works so well. So don't stress about traveling on your own because I just think it's all part of the experience, and it's actually one of my favorite memories of traveling. And my first time was getting around on my own.
It makes you feel kind of like empowered, doesn't it? And then also you're like walking around the airport by yourself. It's like, oh, I'm mysterious. Like everybody's probably thinking, what's that girl doing by herself? But like it is good. Like I really don't mind traveling by myself. I like hadn't honestly done anything really by myself until the when I had to go and get my visa before camp. Obviously you've got to go to either like London or Belfast, the embassy to get your visa. And I went to London and I stayed there for like I think I stayed for 2 nights and I just had a little solo trip in London and it was really nice. And I think after that, I was like, oh, it's actually quite nice doing things by myself. Like, I don't mind my own company. So even things like if you've got your embassy appointment as well, just rerunning it back a little bit before the flights, but for your embassy appointments, I know a lot of people want to like take their parents with them and stuff, but I'm pretty sure your parents can't come into the embassy with you. Like, you have to go in by yourself. So like take that as like your little trial run. If you go into camp alone, think, right, I'm going to go at the embassy, I'm going to do this alone. And then once you've done that, because the embassy can be a little bit scary actually, once you've done that, then it's like you kind of good to go. You set, you can do anything.
I think you go to the embassy and you see the long queue of people, and like you look at the building itself, and you go in and it's all white. It's quite like intimidating,
Like
but
Hunger Games.
yeah, it's intimidating. You're waiting. If you're lucky, you can be in and out, but if you're unlucky, like I was, and I was stuck in the pouring rain outside, I was there for hours, and I was so nervous. But when I got to the desk, to the person, he was just chatting to me and telling me his plans for going back home for the 4th of July and how his sisters invited him to stay in the city, and like he was just
Yeah.
having crack on with me. He was lovely, and I was like, all of this anticipation and worry about doing this interview, and actually
Hmm.
normal people on the other side. They just want to make sure that you meet all the requirements to get the visa, and they're not there to trick you. So like, don't worry about that. They're literally there to grant you this visa. You've just got to kind of let them know what your position is at camp, where you're going,
Hmm.
and I mean, my guy, because you have two interviews, don't you? You have the one where,
Yeah.
is it you do your fingerprints and
You
stuff,
do the 10 printed thing.
and then the second one you go to, that's the one that kind of grants you the visa.
Yeah.
So I remember the first guy was really lovely. He was telling me tips, was asking where the camp was located, was telling me he was going for 4th of July fireworks again. And then the second guy was a little bit more serious, but I think the second guy who actually does your visa and grants it, I was only sat there for like 2 minutes. He's like, where are you going? I said, Pennsylvania. He said, what's your role going to be at camp? I said, I'm going to be a general counsellor slash volleyball specialist. What are your plans for coming home?
Mm.
I said I had a job.
Yeah.
So that was literally it. It's like it's a doddle really. It's a walk in the park.
I know it like seems really daunting, doesn't it? Like you were saying, when you get the big building and you're queuing up and you're waiting and things like that. But then if you know you've got nothing to worry about and you're not a criminal, then you're fine. Do you know what I mean? Like I remember when I had my little interview bit there with the second person, they were just asking me about like what my current job was, what I do at the minute, and like at that time I was a bra fitter. And I was like, oh, I'm a bra fitter. And they were like, what? And I was like, I fit bras for people. And they were just so confused by it. I was thinking, oh my God, he's going to think I'm like lying because this just sounds really outlandish and you didn't know that it was really a thing. But I got my visa approved. So it was all okay. Yeah.
Totally forgot about the embassy because obviously, fortunate enough that the past few years we haven't had to go to the embassy. It's
Hmm.
been a case of, because there's so many interviews needed for first timers. We've been lucky enough. Have you done the same thing where you've just sent it in the post?
Yeah.
So easy, especially for us because we live so far away from London, and
Hmm.
it's been so expensive to get down there. But if we ever have to go, we could make a girls trip of it.
Oh my God, yeah, we actually could. That would be a shout.
Let's do that. But we're so lucky now as like returning that we can just post it. But if you do have any questions at all about, the embassy process or anything, just drop us a message and we're
Yeah.
happy to kind of walk you through the steps. Which actually takes me all the way back to before the embassy. We'll not talk about flights right this moment, but what always worried me and stresses me is the DS-160 form online.
Oh God, yeah.
Is I remember that was possibly the most daunting thing ever when I was filling it out because it's so many pages, and
Hmm.
like, do one thing wrong on it, you've got to like triple check to make sure that you've got all the right information in, and
Yeah.
I'd say it takes about half an hour, 45 minutes to do, and then it can time out as well.
Hmm.
So it is a really stressful thing. So basically what happens is you'll get your DS 2019 from your agency. This then has a number on it which allows you to apply for your DS-160, which then allows you to apply for your embassy appointment. You'll kind of, once you go through the process, it makes more sense. It is a bit confusing to people if you're not currently going through the visa process. Um, but it is such a stressful document, and as long as you just make sure you give yourself enough time to sit there and fill it out and just get it done, that's the most important thing. What did you think when you first saw the DS-164?
It was long, right? And the worst part for me is the fact that I'd moved out for uni, so I'd lived in multiple different houses. So when you've got to put like your address history, it wasn't just a case of filling out one, and that was me for the past 5 years. I was literally putting down like 4 or 5 different houses, which was annoying, and the dates you move in and out. And then the next one was like you have to put like your 5 previous trips to the US, and like I'd been when I was younger a few times, but then like it was like 2010, 2012, 2013. And like I don't remember the exact dates that I went, and I was sitting there panicking, thinking if I put like, oh, I went in like I don't know the 1st of April till like the 14th of April 2010, but I actually went the 2nd of April to the 15th, that they were all of a sudden going to turn down my visa. So that stressed me out a bit, but it was just like remembering everything. Whereas now I've got a little note on my phone of all the dates I've been to the US and all my address history, so that when I fill it out for next summer, it's easy. I can just like breeze through it. But yeah, the bit about it timing out, if I've got a tip for anybody, it's just to save every single section as you go. And also, I'm sure like most agencies do this, but my agency send you like a PDF document because there's certain questions you have to put certain answers to, or the questions are a little bit confusing, and it just has details of how to answer the questions basically and what they basically mean. So make sure you have the PDF open alongside the DS160 and just go through each question as it comes, and then it'll be fine. But yeah, all this DS160, DS 2019, it sounds really confusing, but once you actually start doing it, it'll make a whole load more sense, hopefully.
And your agencies and like anybody online who are returners, just drop them a message, drop us a message, and we'll try and help you as best as we can with it. Because again, we are going through the exact same process as what a first timer does. We still got to do our agency stuff. We're lucky we don't have to do obviously the agency interview, but we've still got to do our agency stuff. We've still got to sort our camp contracts out.
Mhm.
Still got to do the exact same form that a first timer has to do as a fourth timer. We've got to do it all again, and we'll be doing the process soon. So don't worry, we're all kind of still in the same boat. So if you drop us a message, we'll be more than happy to help. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but January to February is when the US government release the 2025 DS 2019 batches to agencies.
I think probably, yeah. I was gonna say, I feel like last year, I feel like I was waiting for ages to get mine. But it like took a little while for it to come through because it was like later. So yeah, like you might not get it straight away, but don't stress. It still gives you plenty time, obviously, to fill out all the forms out.
Yeah, like don't stress now if you've obviously been placed at camp and then things are kind of on hold. It is
Yeah,
because the US government don't release the documents that needs you to get to the next step until the new year. So once the new year starts as well, like all your documents and your visas process will start.
yeah, definitely.
So
Sure.
then
Circle back to flights.
circle all the way back to flights that we spoke about 50 ago. Obviously we said about, the stress of going to the airport and got to go through security and everything on your own. Kind of what was your experience getting on that flight for the first time? Did you meet anybody in the airport?
My experience was an experience the first summer that I went, to be honest. I'll try and keep it short, but basically I decided, because I'd obviously was meant to go in 2020 and it took a few years before I got there, so I decided that I wanted to fly out to camp, I think 2 days or 3 days early, and just go, like, I wanted to go around the city by myself. So I was due to fly out 3 days before my start date, and I was meant to leave Newcastle Airport. I think my flight was at like 6 a.m. or something, to fly to Heathrow and then fly Heathrow across to Newark. And my flight got cancelled on the morning. So it wasn't the flight to Heathrow. I think it was the flight flying from Heathrow to New York. So it was cancelled, and I was like in a mad panic, thinking, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do?" Um, so then I got rebooked onto a flight which I think left Newcastle at like 3, so it was quite a bit later. But I got to Newcastle, went through, flew to Heathrow. My flight was then delayed getting into Heathrow. So when I got off the plane at Heathrow, I had to literally run through the airport to get to my flight to get to New York. Just made it on the flight. And then when I got on the flight, it then didn't take off for like an hour. We were just sat on the runway waiting to take off for whatever reason. I can't remember what the reason was. But in the end, if that does happen to you, make sure that you claim your money back, because I was delayed by I don't know, like I think it was probably like 10 or 12 hours late getting into New York, and it was an international flight. I got like full compensation for it. So I think I got like, you either could claim like 450 or £500 back, or you could get a travel voucher, and I think I got like $600 or $700 travel voucher. So if the flights don't go to plan, don't stress, because you should get them refunded. um So yeah, it was a little bit of a stressful trip getting in for me the first summer. And then on the way back, my flight also got messed up as well. There was like one flight got cancelled, so I couldn't get back home. Um, but yeah, it all works out in the end, not to stress anybody out. Um, yeah, did you have any flight problems or was yours smooth sailing?
Touch wood, I've never, and I'm literally getting on a flight soon, so I shouldn't say this, but touch wood, I've never been delayed or anything. I've always had a really
That's
smooth
lucky.
between Newcastle Airport and Heathrow Airport. I've
Mm,
always been very fortunate in that. But what I will say is my first summer, everything ran so smoothly,
mm.
like the whole thing. And then I got to Newark Airport. Imagine if we'd flew on the same day, by the way.
That
How
would have
cool.
been so crazy.
But we got to Newark Airport and I got my suitcase. And I was like, my suitcase just isn't wheeling correctly. And I looked at the wheels, everything was fine.
Mm.
So like I flipped it over, they'd bust me suitcase open.
No.
They'd ripped the zips off the suitcase. So I knew as soon as I opened that suitcase, I wasn't going to be able to shut it. Well, guess
Yeah,
I was also going to New York for 4 days before I got to camp.
yeah.
Well, how am I going to get any clothes or anything that I need out of my suitcase when I'm going to open it?
Gonna,
It's going to be broke. And then not only that, but because I had a massive backpack on and a
Mhm.
massive like handbag as well, I like this is so random, but I hadn't been to the toilet from literally when I left the house.
Oh God.
And I mean, like our travel days to get to America are usually around
Long.
18 hours because of like the waiting in the airport, then the flight down there, then waiting at Heathrow and stuff like that. So I hadn't been to the bathroom since I'd left home. It had been about 18 hours at this point. I'd pre-booked like a taxi from the airport to New
Mhm.
York because I was obviously a little bit wary of like getting there in one
Yeah.
piece if I got trains and stuff like that when it was the first time ever in America. So I was stood in the airport and I had no cell service. My phone wasn't working, and the taxi that I was meant to be getting took 3 hours to get to us. And
Oh my
luckily, the
God.
people that were getting in the same taxi as me were kind of hanging around and were really nervous as well because it was kind of like a shared minivan. But it took another 3 hours before I got on the bus. And then, obviously, it takes well over an hour to get into New York City because if you know that
Long.
massive long tunnel,
Hmm.
always traffic just before the massive long tunnel that
Yeah.
the city. Well, we were stuck in that for ages. I was
Oh.
petrified because cars were beeping the horns and nearly crashing into each other because in America they drive like absolute crazies.
Hmm.
So my stress wasn't necessarily the flight. Everything ran completely and utterly the best way I possibly wanted it to. But when I got to the airport, my suitcase was broke. It wasn't my suitcase, by the way. It was my sister's suitcase. So I've
Oh
never lived
no.
down. My suitcase broke, and then I had to wait 3 hours for transport. So
Yeah.
that was where my first time experience traveling didn't
It's
go
not
so.
ideal.
No, not at
No,
all.
I mean, but then at the same time, it's kind of character building. Do you know what I mean? It's like, although it's kind of stressful at the time, it's nice that we've sit here and like laugh about it now. Even though at the time it's like the end of the world, it's the worst thing ever, but we can kind of laugh about it now and share our stories, which is fun.
But that's kind of all the worries I think that
Yeah.
kind of come before traveling to camp. And then I think we plan on doing a part two when it actually kind of is getting to America, stepping foot off the plane. But kind of we'll go into like the stresses of, what happens before camp, getting to camp, stresses at camp, all that sort of stuff, including even like traveling afterwards, where we can kind of dive into that a little bit more.
Mm,
But if you do have any worries or concerns, just reach out to us. It could be something that we'd forgotten about, like I'd forgotten about the embassy.
yeah.
Ellen reminded us of that. So, kind of, if there is anything that you feel a little bit stressed out on, drop us a message on privately or to the Camp Chronicles podcast, Instagram or TikTok, and we'll kind of let you know if this was something that we worried about or what you can do to kind of relax them nerves.
I think it's sometimes comforting listening to other people talk about it as well, and also being like, "Oh my God, that's something that I'm worried about." But then hearing their story and being like, "Oh well, something bad happened with their flight or their luggage and they came out of it the other side and it's fine. So sometimes it is comforting, isn't it, just to hear like people's little stories about things, and then it makes you think, oh, maybe I'll be okay.
Well, we really hope that you enjoyed this episode. I know we've really enjoyed filming it. And we will see you next week for another episode, which is a very exciting one with a very, very special guest.
Yes, it's round two, special guests. If there's anybody else that wants to get on as well, just drop us a little message and we'll see what we can do.